Stormwater Committee, welcome. This is our April 7th, 2022 monthly meeting. We're meeting here today at the Midtown Hills Police Precinct. So I ask everybody to be patient with us in case we have any kind of technology surprises. We're going to take care of a few items of business before we get to our first case. So I ask y'all just to relax until we go through the normal routine here. So we are called to order. All right, so our first item of business is the approval of the March 3rd, 2022 meeting minutes and decision letters. So I want to ask all of our committee members to make sure they have this opportunity to review, consider, propose any edits or deletions that they see necessary, and if appropriate, one motion addressing both the minutes and the decision letters would be welcome. So.
Chairman, I make a motion to approve the March 3rd, 2022 meeting minutes as presented and the associated approval letters.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the decision letters and minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. We have approved minutes and decision letters. Okay, so our first case this morning is 2022-0004, Mending Hearts at 4101 Albion Street. So we'll begin by reading a legal statement so you understand your rights of appeal, and we'll have a staff member summarize the case so that everyone listening in can understand the various characteristics that you're asking us to consider. We'll give you 10 minutes to review your proposal. I'll give you a 2-minute sign and a 1-minute sign when we get close to that. At the end of your presentation time, we'll open it up for a public hearing for anyone to speak in favor or against your proposal. Unfortunately, I think the way it's going to have to work is we're going to have members of the public come up here to speak at this table since we don't have a podium. So we may ask one of you just to kind of sit off to the side, and so we don't have you walking back and forth, because you'll need to stay up here when we close the public hearing and then start the committee deliberation in case we have some questions and answers for you. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so we'll just kind of be informal and make it work, okay? All right. Mr. Bowman.
Opening statement to the applicant. If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Committee, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the committee's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied. Case number 1 on the agenda is case 2022-00004, Mending Hearts at 4101 Albion Street. APN is 09-108-027801. Inspector is Kimberly Hayes. Council District 21, Brandon Taylor. Applicant's request: disturbance of stream buffer and waiver of buffer signage. Appellant is Mending Hearts Incorporated, represented by Tim Turner, T-Square Engineering. Comments: Stormwater staff. Staff suggested that a portion of the buffer be designated as a no-mow area with plantings to demarcate the zone. Codes had no comment provided, planning no comment provided, and greenways no comment provided.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowman. Okay, so this is a portion of the agenda where we will ask you to present your proposal, and if you'd start by having a lead speaker, just kind of introduce yourself, introduce each of your guests, or have them introduce themselves. Just tell us kind of what their particular expertise is so we can understand who to ask questions of in case you have particular information or expertise that would help us properly consider the decision. And then after you've introduced everybody, we'll start the clock. All right.
I'll go with you, Tim, and let you.
Well, I would like to take Tim's position. I am Curtis Stewart, Director of Land Planning for T-Square Engineering. Tim's not here this morning. I'm a landscape architect, and I drew the plans for the landscape portion of this.
Yeah, my name's Jim Myatt. I'm the architect, drew the plans, house plans.
I'm John Gillum. I'm with Gillum Incorporated. I'm the GC on the project.
Katrina Frierson, founding CEO of Mending Hearts.
We were just talking to Jim. We didn't really know how to start with this. I assume everyone has the write-up that we submitted. Logan, is that correct? Okay, so I'm not going to rehash all of that. I guess we'll just jump right into it. As a landscape architect on the design of the site, just briefly, had some notes. The existing home building that was there, as opposed to the proposed building, represents about a 40% decrease in encroachment into the 30-foot buffer that is required. And with that, I know Jim will address the architecture of the building itself. We looked at alternatives to how to not encroach at all. But based on the services that Mending Hearts provides to the community, a footprint that was totally outside of that buffer was not going to work, would not be able to serve the community. The building that is proposed actually has a 33% increase in bed space and service space for the community. So when weighing the reduction of existing to the proposed community service, that leads to our request to have to not have to be totally outside the 30-foot buffer. The landscape plan is all native going in. I think the biggest issue would be the no-mow zone. And from a designer standpoint, we felt that going back in with a total native environment in this particular urban setting, when all of the areas around it still have the invasive exotics of the privets and the honeysuckle and the English ivy, was almost an undue burden to try to make this a pristine native riparian zone in this one little quadrant. So if you see on the plans, there is an area in between the stream bank itself and the building that has a designation for turf. But given the conditions and the shading there, we don't expect the turf to be a manicured lawn forever. It will transition back into a forest duff type of environment with maintenance, hopefully to fight back against those exotics that are surrounding the site. So reducing cubic yard volume in the site, increasing, introducing native plant material, and doing it in such a way that creates an aesthetic for the community and the guests, the residents of Mending Hearts, I think is a great balance for this design. All yours, Jim.
Okay. So we've designed a house, it's an 8-bedroom house that houses the women that are in the program. And we were able to get 8-bedroom house, a 20-foot wide house, approximately 60 feet long, 3 stories. And they're on Albion. We have other houses that we have done also, you know, that do the same thing. We were able to make the houses wider on those because we didn't have the stream issue, but we feel like we've made the house as narrow as we could, because we run into issues with stairs if we start trying to make it skinnier, and so we feel like it'll be a good addition to the area, aesthetically as well as functionally, you know.
All right, you got about 7 more minutes left, or 6 more minutes left if you want to say anything else. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, I think that pretty well covers it,
Okay.
what I had to say about it.
All right, great.
I guess overall for us is that when I purchased this land, I don't know when, to assist these women in the community, I think I'm not sure if you even know of Mending Hearts, but we assist the homeless indigent women who are homeless due to addiction and mental health disorders. And all these women are ambulatory, and our job is to get them back up and living and back to society. And my goal is always to provide them housing, and I want them to live as other people do and not institutionalized. And this part of the program, where they transition in from our clinical service, meaning treatment, they then transition down into what we consider our peer program, where they're starting to go back to voc rehab, looking for jobs, and things of that, and so they're working. The previous homes, when we purchased them, there were 5 triplex, quadruplex, and so we rehabbed them until you can't rehab no more. I don't care how old a structure is, you know what I mean, you just rehab and you can't no more. And so we've been blessed, from funders here locally to support us in rebuilding and restructuring that whole community within that 4 blocks. This is the last structure in that part that we have to deal with, and pretty much one of 2 of our last structures in the entire community that we've rehabbed and restructured. And so my goal is to, and I wish you guys could come over and see the work we've done previously. You would understand why this home is so important for us, and it's the last one. Would you say in our community, back in our urban setting, we would say the last house on the block, right? And so it is important for us, and I know that the buffer, when we looked at it, it was the 30-foot buffer, but I think us as an agency, the same way we maintain these women we serve, I think we'll be able to maintain that buffer and keep it clean and do what's required of us as an agency and a community provider.
Okay, is that it? All right. Okay, so we'll come back to you with questions. So at this point, we're going to open up the public hearing and see if there's anyone here to speak in favor of the current proposal. Anyone here to speak in favor? All right, that makes it simpler. Okay. Anyone here to speak in opposition to the current variance proposal? All right, seeing none. Do we have any letters, emails, council representatives here to represent other views?
I had some people inquire just about what the variance was, because they got a letter, which is our typical process now, but none in favor and opposition. They just thought, we're just curious.
All right, so at this time, seeing no additional public input, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open it up to committee for questions. One of the things that's I think you made clear is that you already own the property, you bought the property. And I guess the other thing I need to clarify for myself, are we talking about a zone 1 or a zone 2 buffer? What kind of buffer are we talking about here?
It's just a 30-foot buffer, yeah, zone 1.
30-foot zone 1, okay. And can we have an aerial view that would kind of look out at the larger sort of sub-watershed, yeah, so we can just kind of see what kind of, okay. All right, a mix of commercial and residential, maybe a little industrial over there to the right. Okay. All right. And can you kind of go down to the neighborhood level, kind of see what the stream looks like?
I can try. I'm in a PowerPoint right now, so give me a second to get to GIS.
No problem. Yeah. And I'm not doing that just to see how good you are.
And you wanted me to scale out to?
Yeah, just kind of the neighborhood, maybe 6 blocks or something. 4 blocks, that's almost it. Yeah. Just trying to see how wooded the buffers are around there.
And then that's the river. Yeah, I was curious to know how close we were to the Cumberland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, our challenge is that we're limited to the facts of the buffer ordinance. And that is our primary lawful consideration. All the other factors associated with it that are not related to the hydrologic characteristics of the stream, the benefits of the buffer, and how that can be mitigated. Anything outside of that, unless it's related to public health and safety or certain criteria that are listed in our guidelines for considering a variance, you know, we're really not allowed to consider. So our primary goal is to make sure that the buffer stays healthy, and if there's an encroachment, that we can mitigate it if we feel like the mitigation is warranted. For Zone 1 intrusions, we've been very hesitant to grant intrusions into Zone 1. Zone 2, you know, we try to be a little more flexible with minor intrusions and corners of buildings and portions of driveways and portions of porches and that kind of thing. So the goal is to try to significantly mitigate the intrusion to make the proposal more reasonable to consider granting a variance. Specifically, how many square feet of the building is encroaching on the buffer?
The new building?
The new building.
3,153 square feet, 3,153.
Okay. So do you have any room at the back of the lot to pick up square footage of mitigation of plantings? Do you have any other places on the lot that you're not building a building or putting a parking lot that you could make more spongy?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking
The backyard, yeah. The back
at.
end.
Yeah, the back.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're,
Actually push it back and L it. You'd almost have to make an L because you start to butt in a little bit. So I'm just visioning it. I don't see it here, but you would actually back it up and L it to the right.
You can't, that's part of the
I think that what he might be asking about is an average buffer width consideration versus just a straight line reduction.
Correct.
And the 3,100 square feet, that was vertical, I'm assuming, because the
I
footprint
was gonna ask Jim that the footprint is not 3,100 feet that encroaches on the buffer. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think that was right.
no.
But I'm not
My
allowed
eyesight's going,
to. Codes are correct.
Yeah, you'd almost have to.
okay.
Yeah, so you'd have to.
That's not shown on here really.
Right.
Yeah, the application was for a 12-foot reduction, and it looks like half, this 5-foot sidewalk encroaches and.
Okay. You know,
The sidewalk's gonna be permeable pavement as opposed to concrete.
Well, and that's something that I know is difficult to execute. I was gonna ask, it looks like based on the topo that the back end of the ADA path is elevated just to get up to the finished floor. And so I wasn't sure if that's gonna require a railing. And we've looked at some applications in the past where doing the sidewalks and pavers, especially right next to a building, might cause some issues because there's probably wood framing with a subfloor that goes down 14 inches. And I think it might cause more harm than good.
you don't want infiltration near the building.
I would almost, it's just pedestrian foot traffic. It's not cars parking there. And so I would rather it stay concrete or next to the building. And I was gonna ask about the 15-foot drainage easement in the front. And for us just to consider how we, vote or phrase a vote later, depending on which way it goes, because a lot of times Metropolitan doesn't want pavers in an easement. So I don't want that to make anybody come back later if they were to get approved.
Yeah, and staff's consideration too, I think, is warranted as well. It's really not a bad thing to have sort of an island that's. I think you said you were concerned about having a truer native buffer in a sea of all these invasive that's not really a problem because we've created lots of buffers around town that are kind of islands unto themselves, and they really do well. And, you know, it's amazing the wildlife you see at those sites and the quality of water that comes out of these really healthy, small buffer islands. But, and then I think you're also asking for a variance on the signage as well. Was there any particular reason why you didn't want to have signage on the site?
To be honest, I don't know. That was, as the project came to me, that was in the description, and it just flowed through.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm lost on that one. We got to go back down to my third grade level.
That's all right. But typically, we require signage along the buffer to
Permanent.
remind people not to mow it.
A permanent, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a request, I think, not to ask for a variance for relief of the signage as well, so. And since this is kind of commercially run around commercial sites, we typically like people to know, particularly since they hire a lot of maintenance out, subcontract, that kind of thing. It's really good to have people who are not familiar with the site knowing they need to stay out of a buffer site. So we do want to kind of protect your mitigation as well. Okay, so so the challenge is that it's really hard here to kind of craft a solution on the fly that will work. But, you know, what can you all do to kind of enhance this to offset some of this, the actual intrusion of your building in the Zone 1? Is there anything you all can?
Before you answer
can
that,
give us?
Can I interject? I'm
Yes,
sorry,
please.
because it builds on what you're asking. Has the applicant applied for a setback variance? Your side setback here is 5 feet. Is that right?
I was wondering about that too.
What's your setback from the side?
5 feet.
It's 5 feet.
Yeah.
And how, I think your dimensions are off on the house plan, unless is it 62.5 feet long?
Yeah, and that includes the
Okay, so not
porch, the front porch.
I see.
Yeah.
And so 62.5 feet, you know, times the 5 foot width is like 300 square feet. Okay. And I'm not saying that you're going to get your side setback variance, but how many square feet of the building is in the Zone 1 buffer of the building? That was the question we had before, and it was 3,000 feet, but that's wrong.
Yeah, there's 772 square feet of footprint in the 30-foot buffer.
But that includes the ramp, I think.
Yes.
So let's not include the ramp. Let's, you know, the ramp we can handle later. How much is, I guess, conditioned space?
I didn't break that
Building
out.
space.
Visually, it looks about half, but I didn't break out the square footage on that from the CAD perspective.
And I would agree with that. It looks, you know, like a 4 to 5 foot wide strip of the building of its entire length that is encroaching into the buffer. And that also just so happens to be about what the side setback is, 5 feet. I think we're premature in coming into this committee, and maybe it's a side setback variance request first to determine if we can shift the building over. And I think you have maybe a case for a hardship given the Zone 1 buffer disturbance to make to that committee
Almost
before
a
it
zero
comes
lot
here.
line effect.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the ramp could be handled with the ramp could be a wood ramp. The ramp could be something that we could review in this committee later.
It can be elevated.
It can be elevated.
Yeah. It can be open underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah. And grass is planted under it or something.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I better not do that. But you've got a lot of support for a variance on the setback here.
I've got a question though, just, I don't want to send them to BZA just to then find out that it creates building code issues with glazing. Do you know if there's any concerns with that? You know, if you were successful in a 5 foot reduction, then you can't have any windows, or really it changes the construction from wood to concrete. And so that's somewhat of a unintended consequence. I mean, it changes the whole construction of what's intended to be a residential structure.
Excuse me, I have a question. Would it be possible just to flip where the ramp is?
That was what I had thought to, if we were to mirror the house, put the ramp on the other side, the ramp would be within that 5-foot setback. And it's not covered, it's just a, and it could be wood. And, that would probably help quite a bit.
And then maybe pick up the building square footage encroachment in the rear to where you really have a 35-foot or 38-foot, whatever the comparable square footage may be.
Yeah, go to an average.
Right.
Make up that difference.
It's a different length. The building's longer than the remaining rear yard, but just pick up the comparable square footage in the rear and plan it as if it were also buffer and increase the plantings in the rear.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're meeting a public purpose, so, we have a little more flexibility to try to work with you. We've done things like this for the zoo, for example. So, do those characteristics sound like something you can craft in terms of a revised verbal proposal for us that we can consider? Okay.
I would know so, yes.
Okay. All right, so is there a committee member that would like to kind of harvest all those different ideas and characteristics and put them in the form of a motion?
I'm happy to.
I think you nominated yourself in that conversation.
I make a motion to propose that the sidewalk be removed from the buffer encroachment and that the roof or building footprint encroachment square footage horizontally be shifted and included in the rear yard in a comparable or to exceed it or match it.
All right. Staff, does that accomplish what you all are concerned about?
So you're saying that they should make their building skinnier and what?
They'll take that square footage that is 62 and a half feet long, and it varies from 4 to 3.5 to 5.5 feet, it appears. Whatever, calculate that square footage.
Oh, the square footage in
and
the buffer right there?
Increase the buffer to the south by the comparable square footage.
Got it, okay.
And, and that would address the encroachment in the Zone 1 buffer. It does not address the signage yet.
Okay.
That was the second part of the application.
And it probably doesn't address the mowing either.
Is the fence going to remain? Is there a new fence coming in?
What would you support us doing?
Hold on, wrong presentation.
Well, she's got to follow the ordinance, so.
Well, I saw that there was an undisturbed area on the other side of the fence that helps stabilize the stream bank. Is the intent to leave all that vegetation in the stream bank as is, remove the fence, and then add additional plantings adjacent to it? Or were you going to go in there, take the fence down, clear out some of the stuff in the buffer, and?
There will be no clearing of what is there now. Those of us that work in a riparian zone know that if you start pulling that privet and honeysuckle out, you're going to be disturbing the roots of that. Proper maintenance of that, of course, is cutting those and treating and killing the invasives, but leaving the roots intact from a structural standpoint. And then with the additional shrub material going in adjacent to that fence, which may or may not come out or be replaced, the root structure of the new shrubs will take over and help. I mean, the use of the oak leaf hydrangeas and the spreading characteristics of those are actually going to do more benefit than the privet, that will eventually, hopefully, be killed out. And we see evidence of that out here in the rain garden out front. That stuff spreads, it just takes over. And that's the intent of the plant material used along the riparian zone, is to not be individual plants, but to spread out and take over from above ground and below ground.
Our experience with privet is it's mean. And you try to kill it one year, it's coming back. And no oak leaf hydrangea is gonna defeat that privet.
But part of the problem, you can kill one plant, but if the seed source upstream, downstream, and across stream is still there, the birds are eating those little seeds and dropping them everywhere. So it's a replication. You have to destroy and eradicate the seed bank, which is not gonna happen in this country.
Or compete
So
with it.
That's always gonna be a maintenance thing.
Yeah, compete with it with density of plants. All right, so the fence question, though, was your original question. So, and typically, we're concerned about structures being near fast-moving water and,
Well, we had initially talked about no fence.
okay,
Yes.
all right. So can you confirm there won't be a fence, just
Yes,
landscaping?
I will
Okay.
confirm.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Rebecca, about the fence?
It does.
Okay, what about the mowing piece?
And looking at the stream bank here, I mean, it's filled with invasives, but fairly stable. And your intent is to remove those invasives and replant, or are you just gonna leave it undisturbed? I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Not replacing, mechanically pulling out the invasives, but cutting those off and then planting new native material. So there'll be no mechanical removal of any of the plant material that's there.
We'll prune it, clean it up and make it nice.
Okay, all right. All right, do we have clarity about what's being proposed? We haven't made a motion yet, a second on the motion yet, so we have a motion on the table. Do you want to consider withdrawing your motion and revising it to accommodate our last discussion?
Did he include the ramp?
I don't think so either, yeah. And we didn't get clarification on the mowing yet. So let's see if we can enumerate these characteristics that we're trying to get in this motion. Okay,
Yeah, I did not speak about the ramp because it'll be outside the zone 1 buffer now.
okay. But,
It was gonna, if they mirror the building and mirror the ramp to the other side, it would no longer be an encroachment.
but I guess the motion needs to reflect that they're gonna move it out of their current proposal into their new proposal, okay. All right, so we have the ramp, we have mowing, we have signage, we have pavers going to concrete. And what else? Anything else? Any other elements? Okay.
One clarification for me.
Yes.
If we move the ramp to the other side within the 5-foot setback, then it cannot be covered, correct?
Right.
And is it currently covered? It's not. Okay, it's open. Okay.
And they also own the adjacent property, so it's not.
Oh,
There's five lots in one parcel that I bought all together in a package.
I see.
You can see in the picture, they've already constructed the house next door.
Yes.
And is it built 5 feet off of that side property line?
Yep.
So the two structures will be 10 feet apart. And so in the event of a minor encroachment, she can grant herself an easement
Right,
if it's needed. Or get a construction easement's not a concern.
right. Okay.
All right, so the elements of the motion need to address the ramp, mowing, signage, the concrete, and the extra buffer in the rear. Does that cover it?
The suggestion for the concrete is just to not require it to be a paver. But I'd like to withdraw the initial motion.
Okay.
And reviewing your list, I'd make a motion to approve contingent on the ramp being mirrored to the other side of the house, to not allow the mowing within the buffer, to require the signage as stipulated by the ordinance, to remove the requirement for any pavement to be pavers, and to shift the square footage encroachment of the roof line to the rear yard to supplement the existing 30-foot buffer
With native plantings.
with native plantings.
All right. All right, we have a motion. Any other comments, before we ask for a second, is there a second? Yes, Mr. Hunt.
I asked for a clarification on the no mowing. Is that for the full width or for just a small section?
We were responding to staff's concerns about that, so you tell us.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of if it's all gonna be no mow, it would be no mow pretty close to the structure. We had asked for a smaller, I think a smaller width. I don't know how it affects insurance and things like that, if it's grown up right against the building.
It is, you're looking at the planting plan where there's not a current sidewalk proposed. They had shrubbery adjacent to the building. So I think that would be a consideration of the landscape architect to likely put a landscape bed next to the building when they redesign. And so I would leave that up to them to design it appropriately and to remove as much of the true grass and have more native plantings and,
I think it could be landscaped, just like landscaping right up against a building. It doesn't have to be a wild, unmowed area, if that's what you're referencing.
Yeah, I just want to make sure when this comes through to Kimberly that she can make sure what your intent is gets put on.
Okay.
the
Our
intent's to
original-
minimize mowing.
Our original request was, we usually look for a 10 to 15-foot unmowed stretch adjacent to the stream. And with plantings along that stretch that tend to be, the lights keep going on and off, or is that just me?
No, it's been
Okay.
doing it, yeah.
The demarcation line of that and, you know, and then I think because we're asking for that additional buffer area equivalent to the area of the building that's encroaching, we can pull that do not disturb line out into the backyard, and make that the demarcation zone. And we can work with the landscape architect to make sure those plans reflect what was discussed here.
Okay.
Yeah, and the signs would be put at that demarcation line instead of
Okay.
per ordinance, because per ordinance would be 30 feet.
It'd be in the building.
Yeah.
That sound good? All right, sound good? Sound acceptable to everybody? All right, so we have motion, we don't have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Does everybody understand the motion? Is everybody confident the motion reflects our discussion?
Is the mowing motion clear? Am I gonna have to redo that?
The more clarity, the better.
I would say if you want to just kind of amend your motion to say that you want to reflect the discussion on the mowing that was just had to be included within it.
In an attempt to amend the motion, the no-mow line will be measured 15 feet from the 30 feet top of bank where the building encroaches, or the ultimate outside Zone 1 buffer line in the rear. So that line could be anywhere from 38 to 42 feet. It'll be measured from that line.
Okay.
Then your
All right.
second has to accept that amendment as well.
Seconding the amended amendment.
The amended motion.
The amended motion, excuse me.
Okay. Yeah, that works. I mean, normally we'd have a motion and a second, then we'd have an amendment to the motion and a second, and then we'd vote on the amendment, and then we'd vote on the motion as amended if it was approved, and then we'd have a decision. So, but anyway, we just did it a little more informally because I think we understand it, and legal counsel's here to witness it, so. So we have a motion that has been amended to consider the mowing considerations we just discussed. Is there any further discussion on the motion as amended and as seconded? All right, seeing none, all those that vote in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. So we're going to get you a highly articulate decision letter that will address these details so that you won't have to worry so much about the interpretation, all right? And staff will craft that, and then it'll go into the record, all right? All right, appreciate it. That's the procedure, yes, sir.
Yeah, just start with me. Just go ahead and send your plans over to me, and then well, the decision letter won't be approved until next month, but work through that. Yes.
Mr. Garbutt, before the discussion of the amendments and everything else, you said revision of the plan and a verbal response. I'm assuming you need more than just a verbal response. You need the plan response to everything.
I think we've crafted it in the motion and it will be articulated in the decision letter.
Okay.
Yeah. What I was asking for originally was for you all to give us your counter proposal, and then we would craft a motion around that. What ended up happening was a committee member kind of did that.
We appreciate it.
All right. Does that sound okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, good. We love curiosity of the public process. Be geeky like us, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some of us actually watch recordings of this after it's over, so it's a sad hobby. Okay.
So you're asking, so basically you're saying that we'll get this over, so it'll be next month before we can get our approval to proceed?
Not necessarily, no. If everything, I mean, if we have a clear understanding of what was said today and the plan matches what was said today, then we can go ahead and approve without the decision letter being finalized.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, that's it. Thank you.
We can go home now?
Y'all are in a police station when they say you're free, that's a good thing. Okay.
I'd like to request a quick recess.
Yes, that sounds wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna have a quick recess because Rebecca is gonna give a presentation in a few minutes. So we'll see y'all in 5 to 10 minutes, so. Okay, we're reconvened. This is the April meeting of the Stormwater Management Committee. And our next item of business is to hear a discussion about buffer impacts from our wonderful, intelligent professional, Ms. Rebecca Doan, Dr. Rebecca Doan, in quotes, doctor in quotes. All right, so would you like to address us?
Yes, thank you for having a short meeting so we can fill this in, and we'll make sure we torment the other members who aren't here today and make them hang out with Dodd and watch the video of the meeting later. Buffers are the main thing we deal with here, and I thought it would be a good time to us have a pretty informal discussion about, what we regulate, what we can approve on a staff level, and what ends up coming to you. I thought I'd start it with a fun set of signs that we put together. We have, as you know, tons of floodplain buyout property, and we teamed up with the Division of Forestry a number of years ago to start under a grant called Clean Waters from Urban Forest, I believe, and the idea was we would start establishing more buffers on our floodplain buyout properties. Of course, these properties are in neighborhoods commonly, and people don't love buffers. So we decided to start putting together some educational signage for them to ignore or use to learn a bit more. So I worked with Carol Ashworth. Any of you guys who know her, she's a landscape architect, but also has a lot of graphic design experience. So she helped put together these signs. So it's a 3-part sign, but the first thing we really stress is it's gonna look ugly. It's gonna be shaggy. Where we say a mess is best, we would, like riparian buffer under construction was kind of the theme we were going here. And so this kind of talks a little bit about, what it does and where it is. And it's okay, it's supposed to look this bad. You'll be all right in the end. And so then the next slide goes into, the next part of the sign talks about, the benefits of buffers, stabilizing soil, filtering out pollutants, providing habitat for wildlife in urban areas, especially the woody debris that comes the basis of the food chain that falls into these systems. Also that, the trees shade it and keep it cool, which a lot of the wildlife in there needs to survive. And then, flood mitigation, that's really important for us, especially on these buyout properties. And in all, we're just trying to teach people that buffers are a great way to protect habitat along our stream. the next one, and I found out our QR code isn't working anymore this morning, so that was great. But it just, talks about what you can do. If you live by a stream, you can plant some trees, you can go to this site for more information, even though you won't get anywhere. And this is a picture from one of our buffer restoration plans. And then the backs of the signs just kind of go through the species that you can, look for and try to spot in buffers and talk about, the natives and how they're important. And that these species have to probably be flooded every now and then, and they're okay with that. And then we talked about, kind of, it's always good to get some animals out there for people to see. So the animals you can see in these areas and to look for. And then finally, we always have to do a plug for macroinvertebrates. And so we put those up there, and we put the EPT, the Ephemeroptera, Plycoptera, and Trichoptera, the caddisfly, stoneflies, and mayflies are sometimes what we use as indicators of great water quality. So if you see those macroinvertebrates in the stream, then you know that the water quality is probably better than most. And the idea is that they have a period of life where they have to live in the water to grow up. And so if they've survived that whole period in there, that the water quality going by them was probably pretty good at the time. So that's our fun little buffer sign that we like to put out. And then, thank you. And then I put together just some slides on our water quality buffers. And so first, our buffer went into effect about the year 2000. Was it 99, Michael, when the stakeholder group met? And Michael was on the stakeholder group. So any pressing questions you have about what they created, route them to Michael. But just like there are waters of the U.S. and waters of the state, we established what we call community waters. And so we felt we should go ahead and do that so that we can regulate them slightly differently if we needed to. So community waters are intermittent perennial streams. We don't do the ephemeral, which sometimes the feds do and sometimes they don't. It keeps changing with administrations. Ponds with hydrologic connectivity, so that's important. You'll sometimes hear the farm pond rule, and we go along with TDEC that if it's just a pond that was created within a parcel and it doesn't have a stream coming in, a stream coming out, or it's not spring fed, then we don't regulate it, same as TDEC. And then also, let's see. Oh, and wetlands. Now, I should mention that wetlands are, well, I'll get to that on the next slide a little bit, but we have zone 1, which is a no-mow zone. Ideally, forest vegetation, if there's a forest that they can save on a site and put in that, we do allow people to reforest them, but in a lot of cases, it's just what was a field growing back up, and that's where we obviously get a lot of our complaints in. And then zone 2 could be managed vegetation, no structures or impervious surfaces, and that includes stormwater control measures. We view the buffer as a stormwater control measure, so allowing you to put a stormwater control measure in a stormwater control measure, we thought that would be double dipping, so that's why we kept them out of there. And here is our gorgeous stream buffer sign. This was, I was telling Jay, created back in the aughts with clip art, if you all remember when we had all that access on our Windows program. But we do allow people to create different signs if they want, because we understand this may not be what they want to look at, especially in residential areas. So these are the requirements. I'm sure you've all seen it in our regulations. Buffers also do extend skyward. We put that in our manual this time, but it was something that was established by this committee a while back. And the idea was, well, if you have something shading the buffer, then you can't really get that vegetation growing. So people kept wanting to cantilever over our buffer and say, well, I'm not in the buffer, but just because you're not on the ground doesn't mean you're not in the buffer. So these are the various zones and the various requirements. Buffers get bigger as drainage areas get bigger. And we do put buffers, our widest buffer are on floodways. And interesting, well, floodways have gotten more and more common. I mean, when we started this, you didn't get a floodway until you got a square mile of drainage. But now, those are creeping further and further upstream, but we're still establishing that distance from the floodway. And that speaks to kind of the stakeholder committee that helped create buffers. And one of the things they wanted to do was also just keep people away from the floodway, not just away from the stream itself. So we're gonna keep that line. We might have to do a little bit of tweaking to buffers when our new permit comes out, because they've changed a little bit of the regulations as to what the state's requiring for buffers. So we're just gonna make sure we're, and in there, they do say something like, if your buffer program was approved prior to November something, 2018 or 2016, you know, you're okay, as long as you are still doing this. So I think we might have to tweak a couple of our buffers. As I mentioned, those ponds, not the farm ponds, but the ponds with hydrologic connectivity. We have the 2-zone buffer, and then wetlands. So for streams, we typically align with TDEC's hydrologic determination policy. Originally, when we started this, TDEC didn't really have a hydrologic determination policy, so it was kind of the Wild West when it came to figuring out exactly what was a stream and what wasn't. We used to have a 40-acre rule, so anything over 40 acres required a buffer, but we changed that to, if it's a stream, it requires a buffer. We don't, like I said, we don't do ephemeral, so we don't necessarily go along with what the Corps does. And we're really inching towards requiring TDEC's concurrence on all hydrologic determinations, just because they're in the field so much more. They see these conveyances. We never want to have a different call than TDEC. So far, we've only had, I've only had one difference of call with Brandon Yates at TDEC, and I still think I'm right, but, and you know, we just don't have the staff to go out there and perform that task. So in most cases, what was that? Really? Now, was Katie one of the ones who just left, Michael? Who left?
So I think so. I would note, because Rebecca will not say this to you, that she is a hydrologic determination professional. She holds that certification, and she recently, her and another staffer in our office was recertified, and I got a notice from the state talking about how they basically aced their scores. So I think you may be well versed to question scores, but I do say that to say these stream determinations aren't as subjective as maybe they used to be. There is a definite process that you go through on those, and it is a lot more definitive. Now, it gets a little bit iffy in certain times of the year when it can be drier than normal or wetter than normal. But there is a process that everyone is basically aware of at this point.
Yeah, urban streams in the summer are tricky. So try to avoid doing that one. But wetlands, we require the state or the Corps to review those. We don't review those ever at the staff level. And the state has asked us to use the National Wetland Inventory as the basis for what we flag on parcels and to start our investigations there. And we know that it's a very inaccurate layer. We get this, but we don't have anything better yet. So that's always going to be the starting point for wetlands. There is a wetland policy that was developed with you guys, not you particularly, but with the Stormwater Management Committee. And that was wetlands that are less than 0.1 acres and are of low to moderate quality. They don't have to come here for disturbances, and they can go ahead and fill them as long as they have all their state permissions. Now, we used to get people come in and say, well, I'm just disturbing, 0.09 acres of a larger wetland. Doesn't that count? And it's like, no, the wetland has to actually be less than 0.1 acres. So I think we got that in the last reg revision as well. So there are some things that do not come before you guys, and I want to make sure you're aware of what staff approves without you and what you don't have to see. Maintenance, dead, diseased, dying, hazardous vegetation, we allow them to remove it from the buffer. If it's leaning on a fence or a house, or even it has potential to fall on a house, we'll let them take that tree out. If there's storm debris in the buffer, that's fine. We also allow for sight lines. Sometimes we get with Public Works to help us with those. This is a picture Scott McCormick sent me one day. He drew out the sight line for me. He said, we usually start at 14 feet back from the road, but you can go 20 feet back, and this road is 40 miles an hour, so that line needs to be 445 feet or so. I'm like, thank you, Scott. That's great. It's probably like A squared plus B, yeah, anyway. But so we do allow people to maintain sight lines for safety without coming to you guys.
And I would add that those elements are in the stormwater management manual.
Yes.
For those that are interested.
We do allow people to come in and restore buffers, enhance them, remove invasives, put in native plantings. We do ask that they submit a plan when they do that, and as you'll see me needle people periodically, it just can't be we're gonna go cut down all the invasives and plant stuff and it'll be fine. They need to follow through.
So how do y'all deal with like weed wrangle every year? Because I know that goes on all over the county.
We don't, because those aren't typically regulatory buffers. So they're hitting parks and stuff that don't have them. But if they were to go in a spot, they would technically have to get with us. I should let them know that. All right. So Metro projects, the legal left, so I can say mean things now.
Not like it's been recorded or anything.
So we're not, as Metro, allowed to give breaks that we don't also give to the development community. And we weren't always that good about that. Sometimes it's a Metro project, and they sometimes had a different set of rules, which we can't do. So if we want Metro projects to have different sets of rules, we have to go through council with a resolution to get them those exemptions. And so we did this with greenways. And this was especially for what we call at-grade greenways, where they just go in and, there's no grading really. They're just putting a trail in. So we'll meet with them. We'll ask them to avoid certain trees. And so they don't have a grading permit or a buffer requirement. But if there are design features and grading, we do make them get grading permits, and sometimes even come here for variance requests, which you might be seeing one in the near future. Roads, let's see. So for public works, sidewalks, road, bridges that are funded partially or exclusively by Public Works, well, NDOT, sorry, are exempt from our buffer regs. And then Metro Water Services, the construction and maintenance of water lines, sewers, stormwater drainage projects by or for Metro Water Services are exempt from buffers. Hold on.
But not buildings or tank projects.
Right, so that's why equalization basins, you've seen them come here and stuff like that. But if it's a ditch or a pipe that we're doing, we give them exemptions. This is the big table, and I'm sorry for the font size, and that you don't have nice little screens in front of you like usual. This is table 6.3 in the Stormwater Management Manual. We reference it a lot. Logan will attest to this, and this is our staff approvable buffer impacts. And in our last Stormwater Management Manual revision, we did tweak this a bit, and we based some of those tweaks on cases that get approved a lot from you guys, or a lot when, we used to have a member especially who was like, why is this even coming to us? And so we kept that in the back of our head and added some of them to the list. So trails, like this one used to say greenways, and that's when we got in the, we can't exempt Metro greenways, so now it's trails, generic trails, but they have to be narrow and pervious to come here. Water-dependent structures, that's a slam dunk. Sidewalks required in accordance with the major and collector street plan. That was one of those where you have one Metro entity telling somebody to do something, and then us saying, but you have buffers, and so they were in conflict. So now we try to make it that if Metro's requiring you to do a sidewalk, and they make sure they prove to us they're limiting their disturbance of the buffer, we'll say, put a retaining wall and don't do a 3-to-1 slope or something along those lines. Same with culverts or extensions for road widenings. Road and driveway crossings, that's the one where we'll let it if it's perpendicular and they do a 3-sided box, but they can't be within 1,000 feet of each other, because buffers are most beneficial when they're continuous. Bank stabilization, underground utility lines. Yep, Metro Water Services, gravity-fed sewers, we love putting them by streams, so that's all over the place. Outfalls, we used to send those to you guys, but now we just kind of approve, as long as they're, minimizing the path and the disturbance to the bank, we approve them. And then the big thing that we added was mowing and maintenance for single-family residential infill. They asked that we put together some form of, if you do your buffer disturbance or your mitigation plan like this, it never has to come to the committee. So we set up requirements. So just so you guys know, we give them an opportunity to not come see you. In order for them to qualify, though, they have to be in an existing neighborhood. There has to be a parcel next to them that has, mowed, kind of all the way down to the top of bank. And they cannot be proposing impervious surfaces or structures in the buffer. Even if it's a, hey, I want to leave my driveway here, we make them come to you guys, because a lot of times you can move a driveway. So we want to make sure they come before you. So we let half of the zone 1 for the 30-foot zone 1, or half of the zone 1, even if there's a floodway, the floodway has to be undisturbed. That's no mow. But then they can mow the other half and plant it with trees at a density of 100 canopy trees per acre. Or they can count existing trees towards that density. So this gets them around coming here for those parcels. But as we know, they're trying to put more and more on those parcels, and they probably won't be able to use this very often. But it's here if they want to try it. What you will periodically see here, and you may see more often coming up, and I'll explain that in a minute, is buffer disturbances. A lot of those come to us for complaints, grading without a permit complaints. A lot of times we get out there and see that they have just, gone out and torn out their buffer. I don't know, is this Spence Lane? Linda sent me this one. I don't know what NOV number they're on right now. It's multiple, but we get out to a site and we see this. And so we issue enforcements, and they can have penalties associated with it, and buffer restoration requirements as well. Sometimes we see the buffer disturbance when we're doing grading permit inspections, and we enforce on that at the tail end of the grading permit. But we've also started, as I mentioned, how we count buffers as BMPs or SCMs. When our stormwater control measure inspectors now go out, and they're going out and looking at thousands of sites, they will also look and see if there's a buffer. And if there's supposed to be an undisturbed buffer there, they'll enforce. So we're going to start getting more buffer enforcements. The enforcements vary. We try to base it on what the vegetation was there before they disturbed it. So if the construction project just ended and it was a field before, and they go out and mow within 1 year, we just kind of say, all right, just stop mowing and install signs. But then, we ratchet it up. If they take out, a beautiful area of, forest, then we try to make them have a mitigation plan that would, eventually get to what they had taken out. We require landscape plans and, of course, putting up buffer signs. But back to what the vegetation was prior to disturbance, we had a case recently that is seared into all of our memories, I'm sure, where there had been a previous variance for the buffer. So then we had to figure out how to enforce on a buffer disturbance that was already previously disturbed as a buffer. So they can get more complicated as they go forward. But the easiest ones are the ones where they're supposed to be undisturbed buffers. And that is all I have. If there are any questions.
That was excellent. Any questions?
If I could, I would add just a little bit of a historical perspective. She did mention that the Metro buffer did come out of a stakeholder group, and it was a very large stakeholder group. It was had several council members on it, several members of the public who were interested in water matters, and it was really before Metro Water had stormwater. But it was noted to the community the importance of a lot of these things. But it probably might shock you to know that water quality was not the only reason that buffers came into existence by that group. At the time, we at Public Works were getting a lot of complaints from people about their front porches washing away, or them being impacted by the fluvial geomorphology of streams and whatnot. And, other things, we were trying to build our greenway system over time, and that seemed an intuitive way to set those areas aside for development. And then lastly, and it was mentioned in one of her slides, wildlife migration. It's a real concern in urban areas what is going to happen to wildlife as there is increased development. So while the water quality buffer seems to get most of the attention, there were a lot of reasons to put riparian buffers in place. And, at the time, it was a very novel idea. We were the only city in the entire state that went that far. A lot of cities would protect them during development, but after that, they could be impacted. A lot of other cities have now followed suit, and some of the permits include that. But at the time, it was a very bold move. And you know, we don't have any specific stats, but I do feel like the buffer regulations have served to afford a significant amount of protection to the community during subsequent flood events that we've had. So anyway.
I just wanted to say that I had been doing some research on some amount of cases that the committee previously heard. In about 2004, 2005, they were hearing 200 cases a year, whereas now we're hearing 20 to 30 maybe in a year. So I think the permissible impacts have really reduced the amount of cases that the committee hears.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I used to work for a gentleman who is pretty well known in state government, and he used to describe enforcement actions and really variances as failures of the system. You know, he said, if people follow the law, this person was an attorney, he said, if they follow the law, you don't have to worry about enforcement. You shouldn't have to worry about enforcement. You shouldn't have to worry about variances, because if the law is written well, if the idea is sound, people are going to embrace it. And but unfortunately, you know, just like driving down the interstate, some of us need to be reminded there's a highway patrolman occasionally to stay under the speed limit. And you know, one of the things that had occurred to me when Rebecca was talking was that you know, I've been on this committee a long time, and you know, occasionally it occurs to me, like, you know, is it really worth taking the time to hear one case, you know, with all the other things going on in my life? And you know, some of us ask ourselves, why do we do public service for seemingly very limited decisions, very small agendas? And when you heard Rebecca describing how they had integrated all these individual prior actions and how they had professionally and intentionally and diligently and scientifically integrated that awareness of these collective wise decisions that we had made, or complaints that we had made, you know, the collective participation of professional staff and volunteer citizens on these committees really does create a very positive result for the community. And I think even the state appeals court had some language about the broader attributes of buffers in the ordinance other than water quality. So it's nice to know that, you know, these things that we kind of take as kind of geeky or boring, you know, really do get embraced because they're good ideas. They add value to the community. And it's why people are flocking to Nashville. And hopefully we won't ruin the reason why they're coming here by loosening up our desire to keep Nashville special.
Based on our active number of grading permits, I think mission accomplished.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention this briefly too. I just took about a month ago, I took a group of graduate students down to Central Texas. We visited Austin, San Marcos, and San Antonio. We toured the aquifer springs at San Marcos, where, you know, that Edmonds aquifer, I think it is. It just literally comes out of the ground right there in this amazing spring. And then down in San Antonio, we toured a multi-million-dollar riparian restoration project that was launched by a Santa Gertrudis cattle farmer who had quit his cattle business. His father invented the Santa Gertrudis breed, by the way. We raised him when I was a kid. And he and this Friends of San Antonio River have created something called the Confluence Park. If you ever get a chance to go see Confluence Park, imagine before they created this thing, it was a Corps of Engineer design, trapezoidal, Bermuda grass lined riparian channel. No trees. I mean, it was very structural, very, very, very non-traditional riparian habitat. Now it's this oasis of trees and shrubs and bushes and kayak ramps across rock shoals that they've created, and greenways. And at Confluence Park, they have an interpretive park where you can learn about native grasses and native trees. And they have stainless steel panels that describe the ecological services that each individual native grass provides. It's just extremely well done. And then they have these big butterfly wing-shaped water harvesting devices that are mathematically designed so that the acoustics of the river, if you stand in one spot, you can hear the stream. If you move a foot away, you don't hear the stream. It's just extremely well done. It's best I've seen anywhere in the world of appreciating a river and embracing a river. So if you get a chance to go do that. And then Austin has their greenway system. They've done some amazing downtown low-impact development, native plant parks. One of them was brand new near the state capitol that we just toured. And by the way, there is a Tennessee wing of the Texas state capitol. So if you go in the back door, there's Sam Houston, Davy Crockett in that entrance. State troopers didn't like that when I told them I came to see the Tennessee wing of the Texas state capitol. But they haven't quite forgotten about us, about us helping them with the Alamo. But, or at least starting that initiative that didn't start successfully initially, but because we all died, but we did win the war. But anyway, it's encouraging to see the Southeast begin to embrace intensely intentional protection of and celebration of natural elements of the community. That's the main point I want to make by all that. So. All right. Anybody got any other questions or comments before we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. It was excellent. All right. We have a motion? All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, we're adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.